This is Robin McMillan with Preachers of Interest. Today I'm talking with Bonnie Chavda. So, Bonnie is, you're one of the most extraordinary people I know, and I mean that sincerely. You're not just one of the most prophetic, but you're one of the most prophetic people, one of the most prophetic women. And I love you and Mahesh, and I'm so thrilled to have known you, all these years, quarter century probably.
Has been a quarter century.
Yeah. And so let me ask you a couple of questions. What's the next book you'd like to write? If you could write anything and express some of the deepest, most profound things that are in your heart, what would that book be like?
Well, that's interesting, Robin. I think it kind of goes in two different directions. And one would be to the heart cry of what seems to be a new generation coming up that is intensely hungry to experience real spiritual power and encounter. And I think we need new language in order to reach that culture. And my personal observation is that there are some rich pieces of our spiritual heritage that are really missing.
Like what? What would you say, what in particular is missing?
The fear of the Lord. And I think there's a deep misunderstanding even in the language.
Yeah.
Because Scripture calls the fear of the Lord the treasure of God. So I think that is one of the riches of God that our culture, our generation so desperately needs.
Yeah. Well, what happens when someone comes in contact with the legitimate fear of the Lord and not the weird things so many people think about? But what happens to them?
I would say liberation.
Yeah.
Liberation.
Wow.
Security. The fear of the Lord is really stability in unstable times.
Yeah.
With our global hypersensitivity and obsession, particularly in the West and growing in the eastern part of the world, of global terrorism.
Yeah.
The fear of the Lord is actually God's shalom remedy, if you will.
Huh.
So I have a desire that the encounter and true knowledge of the fear of the Lord as a treasure of God be shared and opened to a generation that is hungry for real spiritual power.
Boy, that's great. The fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, Scripture says.
The benefits, by the way, if you
Yeah.
do look at Scripture, healing, long life, revelation, it's actually the root source of spiritual encounter. You know, in Isaiah 61, where it speaks of the sevenfold attributes or anointings that come on the Messiah of the Spirit of the Lord, it ends with saying, and his delight is the fear of the Lord.
The fear of the Lord. Wow, that's great.
The other book that
Bonus book
All right. is actually, this might surprise you, but I know that you know that my father, who was an old-time American cowboy, cattle rancher, sheriff, etc., was murdered when I was in my 30s. And the other book that I have done a lot of writing on would be a murder mystery having to do with family relational dynamics and that part of American heritage and so on and so forth, that actually would be inspired on some of the true events around that.
That's awesome.
Dynamic.
Yeah, I think about my Mystic Moose Tales, the
Yes.
allegory about the supernatural life of a spirit-filled moose, which they touch a lot of people and open them up to encounters in the presence of the Lord and new creative ways. Actually, writing that second book, just the creative process opens up so many other creative avenues. I've recently begun to do these collages that have nothing to do with spiritual life. I'm doing one on the New York Yankees from the 60s. And I'm doing one on rock and roll in the 1960s. And they're just images. And one reason I saw the movie The Jersey Boys, which was about Frankie Valli. And that's really about 8 to 10 years before my time, but I was interested in the movie, and people 8 to 10 years older than me were dancing out of the theater. And there's something that happens when you can touch a person's heart with the time in their life that meant something to them. And my idea is to be able to touch people that way and then have them find out, oh, that guy's a preacher, that doesn't make any sense, because too much stuff makes sense, it doesn't help. But writing a book like that, I think that's an amazing idea.
It's brilliant, powerful,
Yeah.
and really very prophetic.
Yeah.
You're really onto something there. In our there is a wide influence of sort of the Protestant theological worldview, whatever. And I think that as Protestants, we have missed one of the very important revelations of the majesty of God, and that is really in aesthetics and beauty, and the things that actually speak deeply to the positive emotions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
provide that open place like you're talking about, that ultimately a whole person or a person can more holistically respond to God through beauty, through aesthetics, through those things that speak to the deeper part of our emotions, and bring us forward to engagement with happy, the beauty of our world, and
That's right.
hope and expectation and all
That's
those.
right.
That's fascinating. They were dancing out of the theater.
They were dancing. I mean, they were like, I'm 64, they were 74. They were dancing. And what was happening was they were reconnecting with the joy of that period of their lives back, like, I don't know, 56 to 63, 1956,
Yeah.
1963. And I thought, oh, there have to be creative things you can do that will touch people's youth, that will remind them of these emotions God gave them. I mean, that's where they came from, that they have disconnected from. They've gotten the boredom and the drudgery of life. Well, let me